Hi everyone, how are we doing today? Good? A bit sleepy? Yeah? Did the coffee wake you up yet? No? Not yet? Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming back in the room after the coffee break. And I know we have lunch after this session, so I will try to make it as interesting as I can. So my name is Shomy, like show me the money. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am right now standing in front of you from the middle of the stage at the USLS. I am a short woman, as you can see, wearing a pair of black heels, checkered pants, beige top, and a black jacket. I have long black hair and black eyes. And I am so honored and privileged to be here on this stage in front of you today. So thank you so much, the organizers, for having me. All right, so I want to start with an activity. And this is how it's going to go. We're going to do two activities, right? One at the beginning, which we're going to do in a minute, one towards the very end. So in the meantime, in this 1 hour between the two activities, if you're planning to take a nap, feel free to do so. But you have to wake up within 60 minutes because we have another activity, right? Can we do that? Yes? Okay. So the title of today's presentation is Find Your Passion in Something That Bothers You. And as Jeremy mentioned a little bit during the intro of how I'm passionate about my personal story, I'm going to get into that a little bit. I'm going to share a bit about how I got into this, why I do what I do. But then I also want to leave you with some tangible tools and frameworks that you can potentially use. Maybe some of you already use some of those. I'm not sure about the diversity of this room, but from what I have seen so far, it looks like you're all from different backgrounds, different levels of education, different countries. So it's amazing. So this activity is something that will show us the power of collaboration, the power of unity, the power of doing things together. So let's get it done, yeah? So there are four simple steps. The first step is we are going to rub our hands like this. Yes, let's rub our hands. Then we snap our fingers. The third step is stomp your thigh. The last one is stomp your feet. Yes? So four easy steps, but we're going to do this together, but this is how it's going to go. So you'll have to follow my cue, so pay attention to me. I will move my hands like this, and the first step, like we're doing the rubbing our hands thing, right? So if I start like this, you're going to start, and as I move towards you, you're going to start that step, but then you will continue rubbing your hands, right? And then when I come to you again to snap your fingers, then you start snapping your fingers, but you guys will continue with that previous step. Yeah, understood? Let's do it. Okay, so let's start with step one. We together created a beautiful rainstorm, didn't we? Let's give yourself a round of applause. So, as you saw, when we were doing the steps just by itself, it's quite ridiculous, right? You're like rubbing your hands and snapping your fingers. But then when we all do it together and there's a nice sync, right? It created something beautiful, a beautiful rainstorm, right? Within this UN hall. And I think that's the power of unity, that's the power of a diverse group of people working together. And something that also bothers me, speaking of the title, is that how do we use young people? Young people are subjected to tokenism. Do you agree? A lot of times you will see that we are invited to places merely to tick a box, right? I sit on different like youth advisory boards, and I honestly at this point I think that youth advisory boards are actually used so that they can merely tick that box and say, okay, we have consulted with young people. And another problem is that a lot of times we see young people as a group, just this one group. There is no intersectionality, no diversity, right? We are only the recipients of the things that are offered to us. I have heard a number of times in this conference that young people, you guys, me, we, are the future of tomorrow. But we are the leader of not only the future, we are the leader of today. And in this room, there are engineers, there are scientists, there are innovators, there are activists. There are so many people, right? People who can speak, people who can research, people who can write. We all have something to give back to our community, to the society, to the world at large. So if we as young people could be empowered with the right skills, with the right tools, with the right opportunities, and not just to merely tick a box, but to really utilize what we have to give out there, right? Then I think we could solve a lot of the problems that we're dealing with right now. So that's one of the things, meaningful youth voice participation, meaningful youth participation, youth representation, the intersectionality of young people is missing in today's world, and that is one of the things that bothers me. And that's something that I want to change through my organization, Awareness 360. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a few. So a little bit more about me as a person, so where I am from Bangladesh. Anyone from Bangladesh here? Yes? Nice. Okay, we need to talk during the lunch break. Yeah, so I am from Bangladesh. I am currently based in London, in the UK. I've moved just about a year ago. So if anyone is London-based, feel free to text. We can catch up later. I'm currently working at the Diana Award, which is the royal charity for Princess Diana, in her honor, in her name. And I'm working as a project manager, leading the Center for Social Action project. Fun fact, I like taking toilet photos. So if you have any interesting toilet picture, feel free to send that my way. I have a huge collection of toilet photos, toilets that you can't even say it's a toilet, all the way to toilet in a royal palace. So I have a massive collection. So I know there's like people from different countries here, so if you have any interesting toilet pictures, share it with me. In terms of my academic background, I have an undergrad in economics. It's from University Putra, Malaysia. So I used to live in Malaysia. Woohoo! I see a woo somewhere. Yes. So I lived in Malaysia for a few years during college. I have a master's degree in global affairs as a Schwarzman scholar from Beijing's Tsinghua University. I think I heard from someone yesterday from Tsinghua. I am involved with multiple organizations in leadership and advisory capacities, such as the State Department, Youth CoLab, Global Citizen, and so on. So if any of these organizations or any of their programs interest you, feel free to reach out to me later. I'd be happy to connect you with them. Jeremy mentioned that I am a WASH activist. WASH is an acronym that stands for Water Sanitation and Hygiene. And people often ask me, like, what is my role as a WASH activist? And I try to explain it in two different ways. So one is I am an advocate, a public speaker, an activist. I talk about WASH wherever I go. And the other side is my grassroots level work. So back in my home country in Bangladesh and in many other places, I have worked with different grassroots level communities, communities that are really hard to reach, communities that people often forget about or are left behind, such as the sex workers community. So I have been to brothels to talk to the sex workers community about sexual and reproductive health rights and menstrual hygiene and so on. I have done hundreds of campaigns in different schools in Bangladesh to raise awareness about hand washing. This is long before COVID happened, when we all started washing our hands. Talking about the importance of drinking clean water, the importance of accessing clean water, how do we filtrate clean water, and so on. So that's my work in the grassroots level. So I've worked with school children, people with disabilities, different communities like the sanitation workers community, refugees, and so on. And the other part is when I'm public speaking, I'm meeting important people with policymakers, with decision makers, where I try to basically build a bridge between the two, and try to share my experience in the grassroots level, the stories that I've heard, the people I've communicated with, to hopefully raise awareness about this issue, to hopefully, bring this whole WASH topic up in their agenda, in their priority of what they're doing, to get more investment in the WASH space. So this is, I think, one of my biggest public speaking engagements. This was back in 2017 at the Global Citizen Festival in Central Park, New York, where I had the opportunity to address a crowd of over 60,000 people. As nerve-wracking as it was, but it was also a huge opportunity for me to talk more about my work to a huge audience. This is when I was invited to the Kensington Palace to meet the Prince, His Royal Highness Prince William, to talk about my work in the broadly in the Commonwealth region. This is when I received the Diana Legacy Award from Princess Diana's brother. Any Wolverine fan here? Yes? I think the organizers are Wolverine fans, right? I see the Deadpool poster during Q&A. So yeah, meeting celebrities, meeting people like world leaders, Nobel laureate Professor Mohammad Yunus, and all these important figures, all to share my experience on the ground, to tell them why it is important to talk more about WASH, why is it important to invest more in the water sanitation and hygiene space. So, and these are some photos from some of our projects at Awareness 360 with different communities. And then, as I, after I lost my mom to diarrhea, 4 days after is when I did my first WASH talk. And it was at a sanitation workers community in my hometown where my mom is buried. And as the reason why I wanted to do that project is because I thought if I wait for one more day, then maybe someone else will lose their loved one. Maybe someone else will lose their mom. And I just could not accept the fact that someone can die from diarrhea in this day and age. And that is really what motivated me to step up and take action. But maybe you can probably imagine, like when I was up there on stage talking to all these people, it was very difficult because the emotion is very raw, the pain is new. I was overwhelmed with all these different emotions. But then I also realized the incredible power of storytelling and how people can connect more to our stories through what we have been through than through numbers and statistics. I could give you like a bunch of different stats around water, sanitation, blah, 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 right? But you'll probably forget before we even get to the next session. And I think we have come to a stage where we are immune to all these numbers. We hear numbers in the news all the time. So I think it doesn't affect us in that way. So I saw when I shared the story of my mom, the loss that I have faced, people were taking my messages more seriously because they could put themselves in my shoes. They were thinking of their mother, people that they love, right? And that is really when I decided to become a WASH advocate. So it was really by accident, not planned, but at that very moment, I kind of came to this realization that this fact, like the fact that I had to lose the most important person in my life to a preventable disease like diarrhea in this age, is what bothers me. And that's how I became a WASH advocate. Now, Jeremy did a great job in going into my LinkedIn profile, and it reminds me that I need to update some of the things I've put there in my bio. Very proud to say that now we are working with young people in 70+ countries. So back in 2014, exactly 10 years ago, I co-founded Awareness 360 with my best friend, Rijve Arefin, who is also a very proud Bangladeshi. So the reason why both of us decided to create Awareness 360 is because we were both we went to college together, it was at a burger joint, just two friends hanging out, talking, and then we were like, what bothers me is this and this, and I'm very passionate about the WASH space, and he was like, yeah, and he has an incredibly inspiring story as well, so he was sharing his passion. And then we were like, wait a minute, maybe like you and I, other young people out there also have their own passion area, but maybe they need a little bit of push, a little bit of guidance, some skills, so why don't we build something together? So just like that, from a very random conversation between two best friends is how Awareness 360 was born. And 10 years later, we are now working with young people hundreds and thousands of young people across 70 plus countries, across 6 continents. Through our projects, we have directly benefited over 2 million people. So maybe, thank you. The reason why I'm sharing this story is because you never know where you meet your next co-founder, where you meet your next volunteer, right? Like this, I think forums and conferences like this is a great opportunity for you to do networking. But don't just, meet people, take selfies, add on Instagram. That's great, but really be more intentional about what you can do next as you leave this conference room, as you go back to your community. And how did we do that? How did we reach all these young people in all these different countries? It was really very simple. It was the power of technology, very simple. We have WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, just utilizing these networks. When I go to these conferences, using the power of social media. Our previous speaker highlighted a lot on the power of social media. It's a great tool, and that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what we did at Awareness 360. So I think we have that power as this generation to utilize, to harness the power of technology, and through that, we are able to make change within our power of influence and beyond. And we have also been recognized by different platforms like Forbes 30 Under 30 and so on, which definitely gives us motivation to do more. Now, before I move to that next session where I talk more about leadership and stop blabbering about myself like a narcissist, I want to show you one quick video that Samsung very generously made, because I think that sort of encapsulates my entire story of how I started to become a volunteer at a very young age, all the way to what I'm doing now. Although it's almost a 4-year or over 4 years old, so some of the stats may not make sense. Question to you: do you consider yourself as a leader? Raise your hand. Nice, I see a few. That's great. Thank you. Now, this is a quote, a leadership quote that I really like by Margaret Whitley. A leader is anyone who wishes to help at this time. Can I ask you that question again? Do you consider yourself as a leader based on this definition? Do you wish to help anyone at this time? Yes? I see more hands now. That's great. And I think when it comes to, we have this common understanding, the term leader, that you have to hold a certain position, you have to be a CEO or a founder or co-founder, you have to be in charge of something or someone. But I really think that we all have that within us. We heard a very inspirational talk yesterday by one of the speakers on leadership, on compassionate leadership. And I really agree with it. And I think we all have that within us somewhere. And we just need to acknowledge that. If you are having a difficult conversation on a sensitive topic with your family at your dinner table, if you're raising that topic and talking about it, I think you're already being a leader. Earlier today, during Speaker Lek's presentation, during the Q&A, someone, I think a student from Thailand, most likely, was asking a question. And while asking that question, he was like, can we all give a round of applause? And then at one point, his iPad screen was off or something, but he didn't notice. And the person beside him just tapped on it and So I think that was a great example of how someone can be a leader, right? Someone to help another friend beside him. So I think we just need to acknowledge that we all have that within us, within your sphere of influence, within your position, within your, you could, as a citizen, as a human being, we all have that opportunity to become a leader. Now, I want to talk a little bit about character-driven leadership. And this quote actually highlights that whole topic of character-driven leadership, the definition. So when it comes to leadership, so I hope during the next few days as you're attending this conference, you will think a bit more, you will reflect a bit more on your own character. Who are you? What is important to you? What defines you? What's your story? What bothers you? What are you passionate about, right? What helps you wake up in the morning? And I think it's important because this is what is going to define what kind of leader you are, what kind of leader you will be. There are different, I don't know if you guys read the 4 roles of social movement that an activist can be, right, by Bill Moyer, I think. Have you read it? Like how someone can be a rebel, someone can be a citizen, someone can be, I forgot the 4 terms. But so basically what I'm trying to say is not everyone has to be the activist who goes out on the street to protest. You could be a digital activist, right? We were talking about social media earlier today. You could simply use your Twitter to tweet about certain things. You could, sign petitions and so on. So you could write to your MP. And so there are so many different ways that we can become a change maker. And the way you lead, the way you act as a change maker will really be dependent upon what kind of person you are, what is important to you, what are the values that you don't want to compromise at all. And I think it's important that we think about it a little bit, because maybe you already are leading something. Maybe you have your own nonprofit, your organization, your business, whatever you're doing, or you're leading a school club at your university, or whatever you're doing. It's important that you build a team, right? Because of course we can do things on our own, but it's good to have a good team. And one of the struggles that a lot of startups, a lot of nonprofits actually fall apart, because they start with great enthusiasm, but at one point they just fall apart, right? And especially if you're leading volunteers. It's one thing, one kind of challenge to lead a group of people, a group of paid employees. It's a whole different game when you're leading a group of volunteers, because you're not paying them, right? How do you motivate them to be passionate about your cause, to believe in your vision? And when you're building a team, it's important to have people with different skill set, with complementary skill set. That will help you, because maybe you're not great at everything. Most likely you are not, right? We are not. So it's good to have people with different skill sets. And that's something we talk about a lot. You've probably heard this. But I think what we don't talk a lot about is having people in your team with different leadership style. Just because you are the so-called, the CEO or whatever you are not the only leader. You have to see everyone as a leader within your team in their own capacity. Maybe they're leading a certain team within your organization. And it's good to have people with different leadership styles. There are, I think, 6 or 7 fundamental leadership styles. You can read more about it on the internet. But it's important to have that in mind. Be more mindful about who you're inviting to your team. For example, there's autocratic leadership, there's democratic leadership style, there's pace setting, coaching, and so on. There's different kinds, right? And it's not that one style is better than the other. There is a time and space for every leadership style that it can become handy. So let's say, an autocratic style is where you're saying, this is what needs to be done, right? On the other hand, a democratic leadership style is probably where you're saying, so what do you think, right? You're asking questions to your team. Now, let's say, God forbid, there's a fire. Now, if I become my democratic self and guys, so there's a fire, what do you think? No, it's not going to work, right? That's when we need someone to be of command, to take charge and be like, there's a fire, here's the fire exit, let's get out, right? So there is a time and space and need for every leadership style. So when you're building a team, think about not just your own leadership style, not just your own values and characters. Of course, there needs to be, they need to resonate with your values. There needs to be some form of mutuality. But at the end of the day, it's good to have diverse people on board. Speaking of diversity, one of the analogies that we often hear about when we talk about diversity or the power of diversity is the melting pot, right? You've heard of the melting pot, right? Like how we're all coming together. But I think a different analogy that I really like personally is the analogy of a salad bowl. If you think of a salad bowl, there are different kinds of, let's say, I don't know, tomatoes, cucumber, capsicum, onions, and so on. Each of these items have their own unique characteristics, right? Different color, different shape, different nutrients. If you actually pick them out of the salad bowl, they all have their unique strength. They all have their unique characteristics. But if you bring them all together and mix them up, it becomes a healthy salad bowl, right? And that's the power of diversity, where you can be your own self, but then you also have that ability to work together to do something better, to do something bigger. Now, when you want to become a leader, I think this is a great clear step, 4 steps to leading well. The first one is to clarify your vision and passion. Right? And when we talk about passion, we can derive passion from many different things, right? Oftentimes we associate passion with something that that excites us, that, really, I don't know, that you associate with something happy, something joy, like you're passionate about playing piano, you love music, right? But then that other alternative is where I'm saying you can also derive passion from things that bother you. So you need to have a clear passion that this is what I want to do, a clear vision in line with that passion, then listening to the community that you wish to serve, testing that project, whatever you want to do, and then celebrate and refine the project to better serve. So having an agile mindset, not marrying to the solution, but to the problem, and celebrating small steps. A lot of times I think we become, like, we are so passionate about that big goal, big vision, that we forget to celebrate the small wins. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, why is it important to be visionary? And I want to share the story of 3 bricklayers. Have you guys heard of the story of 3 bricklayers, anyone? No? Okay, so imagine 3 bricklayers. We go to the first person. They're all doing the exact same thing, right? Layering bricks. We go to the first person and we ask, hey, what are you doing? And the person says, oh, I'm just, bricklayering. We go to the second person and we say, hey, what are you doing? And he says, I am building a school. And then we go to the third person and we ask him, hey, what are you doing? And his answer is, I'm providing access to education to my community. So they're all doing the exact same task, but you see the difference in their vision. And the reason why we need a vision is because it will set a direction for your team. It will create trust, because your team will know that you're not just blabbering around a random topic, you actually have a goal. And it will also become a decision-making tool. When you have to decide between, 2 investors, who do we go for? That's when you say, okay, this is more aligned with our long-term vision, so we go with option A versus option B. And it will really help you sustain yourself because you know that big goal that you're trying to achieve. Another way that we can, so now I want to sort of slightly move into, like, you found your passion in whatever way, right? You know what you want to do, but how do you then act on that passion? How do you actually do something about it? And actually, it's some of the slides are from a masterclass on the SDGs that I take, and I know we are kind of running behind schedule, so I might skip some of the slides. But the Sustainable Development Goals, it's a great framework, a great guidebook for us young leaders to actually tap into. And I'm pretty sure many of you are familiar with it and probably are already working on it. But I think there's a huge difference between the Millennium Development Goals to the SDGs now. I'm sure you have seen the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm just going to quickly skip through some of these slides. But yeah, so we all know about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? But then I think it's important that whatever goal you pick, whatever goal you're, most likely any problem you pick, it will be related or relevant to one of these 17 goals. But then there are, like, subsets, there are different sub-goals, there are 169 targets, there are 231 indicators, different kinds of targets, outcome targets, means of implementation targets, blah, blah, blah. So maybe you won't be able to, most likely you won't be able to, target the entire goal. So I think it's better to, like, dig deep and truly decide that, okay, in my capacity, with my team, maybe I can, target only 6.1. So you don't have to do the entire, like, we cannot, practically, we cannot change the entire world by ourselves, but if each of you pick one subset of these many 17 goals, I think we can make a big difference. Then there are different, okay, I'm going to skip these technical slides. Yeah, so the best thing about the SDGs, while compared to the MDGs, is that the SDGs apply to all countries, right? And the SDGs are also nationally owned and country-led, wherein each country is given the freedom to establish a national framework in achieving the SDGs. So research, go back to your home country and see what your country is doing, what your country has pledged, where you are sitting. There are so many different, like, UN conferences that you can attend or even you can follow online. This one is the annual high-level political forum on sustainable development. This one serves as the central UN platform for the follow-up and review of the SDGs, but then there's another one coming up, the Summit of the Future that's happening, I think, in September in the UN. So there are so many different opportunities for us young people to actually be an active part of this entire process. And the best part is the SDGs are interconnected. So maybe you're passionate about multiple issues, right? Like, for example, I am passionate about WASH, but I'm also passionate about gender equality. equality. And I've seen, like, in many places, for example, when I started my WASH work, right, I saw that how gender equality and access to WASH are so much interconnected. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the interconnectedness piece more. So most likely, even if you work on one specific goal, you will be affecting impacting many other areas of the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So what can you do? As I said, you can find your passion, start something. Being empathetic is very important, but also not just I feel you, or not on a sympathy level, but really going deeper. So for example, if you tell me that, Shomy, I broke my leg, right? And I tell you, oh, I'm so sorry. So that's, of course, I'm being empathetic, yes. But then the second step is where I'm actually trying to, I don't know, put myself in your shoes and thinking of this other time when I broke my arm or something. And I can tell you, like, I am so sorry. I know how it feels. I broke my arm once, but I'm so sorry, right? So that's the second level of empathy. But the third level of empathy is where you're being more like compassionate, and you're saying something like, how can I help? I'm so sorry to hear that you broke your leg. How can I help? Should I take you to the doctor? Can I babysit your kid while you visit the doctor? Do I call an ambulance? Like, there are so many ways you can offer someone help, right? So I think it's important that we become truly empathetic leaders, where we're not just feeling other people's pain, but actually offering help and support. Being proactive. Instead of waiting for people to give us the opportunity to do something, if you see a problem, solve it. It's easier said than done, but there are many examples out there of young people bringing about big change. Listening actively, there's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should listen more, not to argue, not to respond, but really to listen and understand what the community is going through. Researching, enriching your knowledge and skills, community mapping. Another huge problem, I feel like, is duplication of efforts, right? We are very passionate, we want to do something, we start something new. But maybe there's already something existing out there, right? Like, instead of starting something from scratch, you could actually join forces. You could bring your ideas to an existing organization. You could volunteer for them. So I think it's very important for us to do community mapping and see what is already out there and what is missing. And then add your voice there. Doing a stakeholder mapping is important. I'm going to talk about stakeholder mapping in a few. Human-centered design approach, keeping human at the center, but I feel like we have been keeping human at the center a bit too much, so it's important to think about the broader ecosystem as well, being a bit more biocentric, thinking of our planet, and so on. And of course, you can volunteer, you can be an advocate, you can be an activist, you can be a business person. There are so many ways I think we all can contribute in some way or another. Now, I want to share a few points, but using the example of climate action, right? So I was talking about interconnectedness piece a few slides earlier. So if you think about climate action itself, it's such a broad goal, and it is also connected to so many other goals. So think of climate and WASH. A community cannot be climate resilient if it is not WASH resilient, and it cannot be WASH resilient if it is not climate resilient. Climate and gender. Majority of the people, like women, girls and women, are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. Climate and the NTDs, the neglected tropical diseases. So I also work as a champion of ending NTDs, and Bangladesh is a high burden country for a few of the NTDs. And so how is that relevant to climate action? Temperature is rising, and in many countries, even where NTDs were not as common, are actually those carriers are thriving because of the rising temperature. So all these different, so we can go on and on, right? So even if you're working on the climate space, maybe not directly, but maybe you're a WASH champion or a gender equality advocate, you can still show up in the climate space and bring your voice to that conversation. Now, continuing with the climate action example, so how can you take climate action? Again, this is just an example, right? So you don't have to do this. But artivism, right? Like, we are all, like, young people are creative. We have that creative mindset. We have so many different creative tools. We have social media. So you can write poetry. You can write a song, and there are so many ways, like using art as a tool to advocate for change, to advocate for all these social causes, raising awareness. I think artivism is a great way for young people to be a part of this conversation and movement. Innovation, you could be a scientist. You could be coming up with some invention. policy, you could work on the policy space, lobbying, citizen journalism, again, social media is involved here, mainstreaming climate action, bringing the climate action conversation everywhere. And then these are a few ways, like for example, Greta Thunberg. We all know Greta, right? Like she has proved that you're never too young to make a change. And then we can do very simple individualistic things like, you know, don't use the plastic straw, taking short shower and things like that. But I feel like we focus like too much on those issues so that we can kind of, you know, basically the company's greenwashing us so that we don't talk about the big ones who are actually contributing to the climate crisis. So we can talk about, you know, it's good to take short shower and not eat meat and things like that. But I think it's also for us as young people important to understand the role that these big corporates are taking. Like what kind of decisions are our leaders making, our world leaders are making, like calling them out. You know, I think we need to talk about them as well, the fossil fuel industry basically. Whales in Polynesia have been granted personhood. I saw this headline and this was just so interesting for me, right? Like, so there are so many ways that we can talk about climate action. The European Court of Human Rights ruling Swiss government's inaction on climate change, violating fundamental human rights. I thought this was a fantastic example of how a lot of older people actually took charge of this, right? So I think no matter our age, whether you're too young, you think you're too young, or you're too old, I think there is an opportunity for us to become a change maker. Nature, officially becoming a musician, earning royalties for environmental causes. I thought this was another interesting example. Is there any Swiftie here by any chance? Yes, please don't kill me for putting this on the slide. But, you know, how do we also hold our celebrities, our role models accountable, right? Like, for example, she was doing the tour, and then I saw the time lapse of Taylor Swift's private jet flights, which was very interesting to me. So yeah, there are so many ways that we can call people out for their action or lack thereof, and I think we have that capacity within us. So we just need to recognize that that leadership ability within us. And then, of course, you all know about SMART goals. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about a few frameworks that you could use for your goals. Obviously, I'm 100% sure you know the SMART goals. Like, you know, I want to save money. That's not a SMART goal. I want to save $500 by August 2024. Saving $100 a month would be a SMART goal, right? Integrating experiences with ORID. I think ORID is a great example. So when you're at places like this, when you're having all these different conversations, right? Like go back home, go back to your hotel room, and take a few minutes every night to just reflect on these experiences, on these many conversations that you have had. You never know, like maybe one of these little conversation over a coffee break could be life-changing for you. What did you observe? What internal reflections arose? What insights did you have? What decisions are you going to make based on those insights? So having this ORID mindset could be very helpful for all of us to really channeling these conversations, this little experiences into something actionable, something tangible, something meaningful. Have you heard of the term framestorming? Anyone? No? So we all know about brainstorming, right? We have a problem, we go crazy, we come up with so many different solutions, right? So that's brainstorming. But framestorming is a step that comes before brainstorming. And the reason why I like framestorming is because when we are framestorming, you are looking at the problem. So we're not going into the solution bit yet. We're not brainstorming ideas yet. We are looking into the problem from different angles, right? You're zooming out, you're looking at it from different angles, from different perspectives, from different frames. So you're really framing the problem, and then to see, am I actually addressing the right frame of the problem? Because the problem can be dealt in so many ways. And once you are sure that, yes, this is the right time for me to take a look at this problem from this angle, then I think the work will become much easier. And then you go into brainstorming. Okay, now we know this is my problem, this is the frame that I'm going to take, and let's go crazy, come up with ideas to solve this. So I think this is a great model. The decide model is a great one. So once you have decided, like, what do you want to do? And you can apply the decide model on anything, really, on your professional life, personal life, whatever decisions you're making. So D stands for defining the problem, obviously. E, establishing the criteria. C, consider all the alternatives, and then identifying the best alternative developing and implementing a plan of action, and lastly, E is evaluate and monitor the solution and feedback when necessary. And I think the DECIDE model works really great. I don't want to spend too much time because I think we're running behind, but I think this is a great model for you to really, when you're facing a decision dilemma, again, these things can go back to the things that we talked about before, right? Your vision, your SMART goal, are those aligned with these criteria? Are those aligned with these alternatives that you're considering? And then you can come to a decision that, no, this is the person I want to work with, or this is the investor I want to take the money from, this is the project that I want to do. And then I talked about stakeholder mapping earlier. So what is stakeholder analysis? So stakeholder is anyone who has a stake in your project, right? Who has an interest in your project. Now, when we do the stakeholder analysis, most of the times we think of those who are suffering, your intended beneficiaries or your target audience, your supporters, like your team, yourself, those who can help you address the problem, maybe your funders, the media who will cover your campaign or whatever, so the broader ecosystem. But oftentimes we forget the opponents. And it's so important because the opponent is a critical stakeholder for whatever you do. There will be someone who will oppose your idea. There must be someone out in the world. Not everybody will agree with what you want to do. And it's important to have to consider them as an important stakeholder so that you can have a plan B. Let's say you're working on climate action. Fossil fuel lobbyists will obviously be your opponent. They wouldn't like what you're, if you want to stop a fossil fuel expansion project, they wouldn't like that, right? So it's good to think of your opponents as an important stakeholder so that you can have a plan B, so that you know what your response is going to be to a likely problem. Now, the stakeholder matrix is an interesting one. So if you look into the y-axis, it is the influence or the power of stakeholders, and the x-axis, the horizontal one, is the interest of the stakeholders. Now, this one applies to any context. It could be like the world at large or at your own project, your own organization. So if you look at the one that is the least important, the bottom left, it's the people who have less influence, as well as no interest or less interest in your project or in your whatever you're doing, right? So these are the people who are the least important because they're not interested and they don't have any power or influence. But it's good to inform them via like general communication, your social media channels, newsletters, websites, and so on. And you want to aim to move them into the right-hand box. So the target is to move the left ones to the right. The one that's on top, meet their needs, are the ones who have influence, very high level, but they don't have interest in you. Let's say, I don't know, you have a small startup that you started, and then let's say the UN, right? The UN is big, influential, maybe, but then they probably don't even know that you exist or your project exists, right? So in this scenario, they are the ones who are like on the meet their needs box. So you want to engage and consult on their interest area. Maybe you can show up at a UN conference and talk about your project, right? Try to increase their level of interest and aim to move them into the right-hand box. Again, that was like a very random example, but it could also be within your country, within your community, or within your organization. Then the right bottom box, show consideration, are the ones who have more interest in your in your project, and they have less influence. Now, these are the people that you want to show consideration, because even if they don't have influence, you never know. Maybe tomorrow that person will become elected as a politician and their influence will go up, right? So you want to show them consideration. You want to honor their interests. So you want to make use of their interests through involvement in low-risk areas. You want to keep them informed. You want to consult with them. And they will be your like potential supporter, goodwill ambassador, and so on. And the one on top, the key player, that's like the people who have high interest in your project and high influence or power. So it could be like your board members, for example, who maybe are very high profile and also are interested in your project. So they are the key players. So key players focus efforts on this group, involving in governance, decision-making bodies, engaging and consulting with them regularly. So if you do like a stakeholder analysis and try to put them in this box, and then you're intentional that, okay, I want to move these people to that box, and then come up with a strategy, this could actually help you scale up your work and get multiple stakeholders involved meaningfully. I'm sure you've heard of the SWOT analysis, the strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. It could be, you could do a SWOT analysis of the person you're hiring for your project. It could be the SWOT analysis of your organization as a whole, but it's a good exercise. And then the PESTLE exercise, the PESTLE model is great. So if some of the things are just beyond your influence, beyond your control, right? Like the political scene, the economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. So it's good to actually have, keep an open mind, keep your eyes open, think about what is happening out in the world and how that may affect you. But some things are just like you just did not see it coming, right? Like some things are just so uncertain. For example, COVID. When COVID happened, like our organization, like a lot of the work we had to simply stop because we had to think of the safety of ourselves, of our team, our volunteers, and so on. So we couldn't do any in the ground project, like very, very minimal. So things like that might happen. So it's good to have that sort of mindset that anything may happen, something may go wrong, and this is my plan B. This is how I want to be a leader during crisis. Moving on to the next slide. Competition versus collaboration. A lot of times I feel like young people, and I understand it's how the system is, right? Like we end up competing for the same grant, right? So I understand like things can be set up in a way where we end up competing with each other, but at the end of the day, we all have that same goal of making this world a better place. So it's good to focus more on collaboration rather than competition. And now I want to talk a bit about impact examples. So we were talking about, so Fridays for Future, we talked about Greta, great example. But now I want to share an example that I am personally very, very proud of, which is the example of my own country, Bangladesh 2.0. I don't know if you guys have been following the news, but over the last, and I actually get a bit emotional as I'm talking about it. The reason why the slide says Bangladesh 2.0 is because there was a huge movement, a student protest that started quite peacefully early July that actually turned very deadly. Over 200 students were brutally killed, and that's just the official figure. Thousands injured, thousands arrested and detained, and the students, and I mean, we're at a university scholar symposium, and it is the university students, a lot of high school, even some civilians as well, including kids and children and young people who were killed during this protest and this movement. So the young people of Bangladesh, the high school and university, mainly university students of Bangladesh, were like, we demand justice. So it mainly started because of a quota reform for our government jobs, and then it turned deadly, and they demanded justice, and that's the result. So a couple of days ago, Sheikh Hasina resigned. 15 years of her rule. We really were a democracy on paper, but it was her. So we are saying that 15 years of dictatorship has ended. So young people within a few weeks, literally a span of a month or so, even less, a prime minister has resigned. We now have an interim government with the Nobel laureate Professor Mahmoud Yunus as the chief advisor. So things are changing. It's still a bit chaotic. Things are still uncertain and unstable, but we are envisioning a new Bangladesh. We are envisioning to reform and build a better Bangladesh. So I would like to request you all, in the honor of all the students and civilians who have been killed and martyred during this movement, to honor them with a minute of silence. If you can please stand up. Thank you. So if you still have any doubt that young people cannot change the world, young people cannot bring about positive change, we are too young, we are the leader of tomorrow, I think the Bangladeshi students have proved in the last few days, although it came at a cost of many lives, but we are seeing change. We have demanded change, and we are seeing it already. So I hope you seek inspiration from the case of Bangladesh that has happened, and feel inspired to make a positive impact. Now, the last thing that I want to do, I remember, I think you remember that we said we are going to do a quick exercise or an activity together, the ABC technique. So when we are talking about, things that you're passionate about, leadership, things that bother you. So you may be passionate about one topic, and you want to talk. I've also mentioned about social media. You want to talk to the media, talk about your work. But sometimes you get asked like the most ridiculous question that you maybe don't want to talk about, right? Because you're passionate about something, you're expert on something, but people just put you in a spot where you don't want to answer that question maybe, or you simply don't know. So in such cases, the ABC technique, and I actually stole this slide from a different social media training I do, but it's a really good one, where how do you, by using the ABC technique, how do you kind of avoid that question respectfully, but then also talk about what you wanted to talk about. So the ABC technique, ABC stands for acknowledge, bridge, and control. To give you an example, let's say I am appearing at an interview and somebody, like the journalist, asks me the question, so what do you think of the war in Ukraine, for example? And now I know that I am there to talk about my work in the water and sanitation space, and maybe I'm not comfortable, or it triggers me. There are so many reasons that I may not want to talk about the Ukraine-Russia war. So in that situation, how do I use the ABC technique? The first one is I want to acknowledge that person. I need to acknowledge that question, right? I can't be disrespectful. So thank you for your question. And then you could give a response, maybe something that's very generic, a war. No one, like, we don't like war, so I could just say, thank you for your question. I'm obviously devastated by what's happening in Ukraine, right? So that's my acknowledged part. And then how do you make a bridge? So I wanted to talk about water and sanitation, hygiene, blah, blah, blah. And here I'm, being asked a question on the war. So I could build a bridge by saying, and there's a lot of human rights violations going on in the community, and one of them is also access to clean drinking water, and that's actually what I'm here to talk about today. And that's actually what I'm working on back home in my home country. So that's the bridge. And then I'm taking control, done with the war conversation. I'm not talking about, and actually here, we are in the UN, we're talking about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that's what I'm working on. I'm working on UN SDG 6, blah, 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 and I take control, right? So it's a great way to be more mindful of, I don't want to be disrespectful, I don't want to know, don't ask me that question, or, So you want to acknowledge it, you want to build a bridge, and then you take control. So we are going to now practice this last thing, the ABC technique. You guys will practice it. So turn to the person to your right, and so one person, you can decide who will be who, but one person in your head, not yet. Here's the instructions. One person will be the one answering. The one answering, in your head, you have to think of something that you want to talk about, and the other person will have to come up with like a random ridiculous question, whatever. It could be anything, really, right? And then you have to use the ABC technique to talk about the thing that you wanted to talk about. Ready? Go. All right, so are we done? Yes? Wow, I love how invested you are. Did you have fun? Okay, what question did you ask? Okay, guys, if we can come back to silence. If we can come back to silence, it will be great. Thank you. All right, let's hear from you two. What did you ask and what did you answer? Because it's usually something that ends up being very funny. What was it? Do you want to share your question and answer? Yeah, please.
Yeah, so by the way, we know each other for years anyway.
Okay.
So because he is from Russia, so I just put your question to him and
Okay.
asked, so what's your opinion about the situation in Ukraine?
Right.
And he answered.
And what did you want to talk about initially?
And funny enough, just before you, there was leg talking about elephants.
Right.
So what I had in my mind was a topic about elephants.
Great. Okay. And what did you?
And,
how did you use the AVC technique?
Well, first of all, I thank him for this question because it's very meaningful. And then I said the situation is indeed very dangerous and very devastating. But have you ever wondered, are there elephants in Ukraine? In fact, there are some in the zoos, and we need to take care of them just as much as we do take care of Ukrainians and refugees.
Wow. Let's give them a round of applause. Good job. Well done. I hope you found these little techniques and frameworks and tools helpful. Maybe some of them you already practice in your everyday life and was a good refresher for you. But the last thing that I want to mention is to focus on yourself. We are passionate young leaders. We want to be change makers. We want to be activists. We want to change the world. But sometimes because we are so passionate, we end up forgetting that we are humans too. We are not superheroes, right? So at the end of the day, it's important that we prioritize our own mental health and well-being. The social media space is quite unsafe these days. It can get overwhelming with everything that's happening out in the world. So if you need to take a break, take a break. Don't feel the need to respond to every DM you get on Instagram. Don't feel the need to always, be on that leadership mode. You can be authentic and honest with your team and say, guys, I'm just tired and I need to take a break. And that's okay, right? So it's important that you focus on yourself. I wish you good luck with your change-making journey. And I hope to see you soon elsewhere. These are my contact details if you want to reach out to me later. But once again, thank you so much for your time and attention.